Traditional African religion for me, it resonated in a way that I had never been able to connect to in my Christian upbringing. So this is actually the origin of how Nannie came about. I began writing the novel after I left New Orleans. So I graduated from Southern University at New Orleans, and then I moved to Houston for graduate school to pursue a Master of Arts degree in English at Texas Southern University. And so while in graduate school, we did a lot of work on marginalized female protagonists. In fact, of course, then I began to realize that as a woman of African descent, whose ancestors were enslaved and who still, deal with some of the repercussions of such an oppressive, complicated history, I started to identify myself as the marginalized female in American society who is largely ignored or either misunderstood. And then I began to search for a way to shed light onto this woman who I felt was a representation of me. So my paternal grandmother, Eva, who's pictured on the cover of the novel Nannie Eva, she died while I was in graduate school. Nannie is actually my great-grandmother on my maternal side, and she had died while I was in high school, but she actually raised me. I grew up in a house with her. After my parents divorced when I was around 4 years old, they both moved to Texas, and my grandmother, my grandfather, and my maternal great-grandmother raised me. So I always grew up in a house with elders. And then in the summertime, I would visit my paternal grandmother, rather. That's the grandmother who's on the cover of Nannie Eva. So after Eva died, Eva is who's on the cover of the novel. That is my father's mother. I felt a stronger longing to write the stories of my grandmother and my great-grandmother, but I wanted to combine them in a way that I can join both the paternal and maternal sides of my ancestral lineage and to make it all one story. So my two stories, my two sides of my family, my father's side and my mother's side, combined and merged into a fictional tale in Nannie Eva, but I was able to weave most of my family history into the novel, but just lend a touch of fiction to it, just to make it more exciting and not to make it exactly a mirror image of my family history. So these two women, Nannie and Eva, were very different. Whereas Nannie was a product of the sugarcane fields of the Louisiana plantations, Eva was a product of the Jean de Couleur and of a mixed racial heritage. I represent the combination of their cultures, and I began to think about how to combine their story into the fictitious account that would include a lot of the family history that I learned about, primarily from my father and from my grandmother. Both of them are still alive. So I've learned so much about my family history from both of them, and I was able to include that into the story. I definitely wanted the novel to be a female-centered novel, but I wanted it to have a balance of strong male presence. It definitely and certainly wasn't my intent to demonize the male characters in any way, but I did want to try to show the connection of people to a city that is a mixture of various cultural heritages, and to also show how this can cause complications in a racialized society. My other goal was to show the similarities that exist between Christianity and traditional African religion, because as slaves were brought to various places in the New World, as far south as Brazil to Central America, to places like New Orleans, to Haiti, and other places in the Caribbean, the slaves naturally correlated their deities, or gods and goddesses,